They said she was worthless, a stain on her bloodline, an Omega so weak, even her own mate spat on her bond and walked away. They threw her into the frozen waste to die alone, forgotten, erased from memory like she never existed. But they made one fatal mistake. They left her alive. And now, the ghost they created is coming back. Not for forgiveness, but for everything they owe her. Stick around till the end to see how the Omega they discarded becomes the queen they'll never forget. Drop a like, comment your city, and let's dive into Naira's storm. The bonding hall reeked of ceremony and lies. Smoke from the ceremonial braziers curled toward the vaulted ceiling, thick with the scent of burning sage and wolfsbane. Candles lined every surface, hundreds of them, their flames steady in the windless room. Outside, a blizzard howled against the stone walls, but inside the Ashclaw Pack's great hall, everything was controlled, planned, perfect, everything except Naira. She stood at the center of the circular platform, hands clasped in front of her to hide the shaking. Her ceremonial dress, white linen with silver threading, hung loose on her frame. Too big. They'd made it for an Omega with presence, with the kind of subtle power that commanded respect, even without words. Naira had none of that. Around her, the pack sat in tiered rows carved into the stone, 300 wolves dressed in their finest furs and leathers. Their eyes bore into her from every angle, judging, measuring, finding her lacking before the ceremony even began. She'd known this moment was coming for 2 months, ever since the bond snapped into place. It had happened during the Harvest Moon gathering. One moment she was serving drinks to the visiting alphas, invisible as always, and the next her chest had seized up like someone had driven a hook through her sternum and yanked. The scent hit her first, pine and steel and winter wind. Then she'd looked up and met his eyes across the fire. Darius Corvon. The bond had roared to life between them, primal and undeniable. Fated mates. The rarest gift the moon could give. Naira had thought it was her salvation. Proof that she mattered. That despite being weak, despite her wolf being small and her scent being faint, she was meant for something. She'd been stupid enough to believe it. Now, standing on the bonding platform with the entire pack watching, she wasn't so sure. Darius stood 20 feet away at the edge of the raised dais, positioned where the mate was supposed to wait before approaching. He wore black leather armor polished to a shine, silver clasps at his shoulders, his dark hair pulled back to show the sharp angles of his face. Handsome in that brutal carved-from-stone way that made Omegas whisper and Alphas step aside. He wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed somewhere over her head, jaw tight, arms crossed, like he was waiting for something unpleasant to be over. Naira's stomach churned. She'd tried to talk to him 3 times since the bond formed. The first time he'd walked away mid-sentence. The second time he'd sent his beta to tell her he was busy. The third time she'd waited outside his quarters for 2 hours until his sister Kira had found her and laughed so hard she'd nearly choked. "You actually think he wants you," Kira had said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Oh, this is priceless. He's been trying to figure out how to reject you without causing a scandal. Guess he gave up on the subtle approach." Naira had told herself Kira was just being cruel, that Darius was conflicted, struggling with the bond the same way she was, that when the ceremony came, he'd step forward and everything would be okay. She'd been wrong. Elder Morrigan stepped onto the platform, her walking staff tapping against stone. She was ancient, no one knew exactly how old, with silver hair braided in intricate knots and eyes like chips of ice. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the hall without effort. "We gather under the moon's eye to witness the sacred bond." Morrigan's staff struck the ground 3 times. "Darius Corvon, heir to the Northern Ridge and son of Alpha Rothgar, step forward and claim your fated mate." The crowd murmured. Anticipation rippled through the rows. Darius didn't move. Naira's heart kicked against her ribs. She tried to catch his eye, but he was still looking past her, through her, like she was made of glass. "Darius," Morgan's voice sharpened, "step forward." He finally moved, but not toward Naira. Instead, he turned to face the crowd, his shoulders square, his voice carrying. "I reject this bond." The hall exploded. Gasps, shouts, 100 conversations erupting at once. Naira felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Her ears rang. She couldn't have heard that right. She couldn't have... What? The word came out strangled. Darius still wasn't looking at her. I, Darius Corvan, reject the bond with Nira Vex. I will not claim her as my mate. Someone in the back rows laughed. Then another. The sound spread like rot. Nira's hands went numb. You felt it. I know you felt it. I felt nothing. His voice was flat, cold. He finally met her eyes, and there was nothing in them. No warmth, no regret, no conflict, just ice. You're a weak Omega. You can barely shift. Your scent is so faint half the pack can't even tell you're there. I won't tie my bloodline to failure. The words hit like physical blows. Nira's vision swam. She heard her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, too fast, too loud. A voice from the third row, Senna, a young wolf who'd always sneered at Nira in the kitchens, rang out clear and mocking. Told you she wasn't worth the ceremony. What a waste of candles. Laughter rippled through the crowd like a disease. Nira's father stood up in the front row. Theron Vex was a broad-shouldered man with graying hair and a face carved from disappointment. For a moment, Nira thought, hoped, he was going to defend her. Darius, Theron said, his voice measured, this is highly irregular. But legal, Darius interrupted. He addressed the crowd now, not Nira, not her father, just the audience. The laws are clear. A wolf has the right to reject a fated bond if the mate is deemed unsuitable, and I'm exercising that right. Unsuitable? Elder Morrigan's knuckles went white around her staff. The fated bond is sacred. The moon herself chose. The moon made a mistake. Darius's tone was final, absolute. No room for argument. I reject her. Morrigan looked at Nira. For a moment, just a flicker, there was something like pity in those cold eyes. Then it vanished, smoothed away by centuries of protocol and law. She struck her staff against the stone 3 times. The bond is severed. Just like that. No trial, no appeal, no second chance. The physical pain hit immediately. The bond scar on Nira's chest, invisible to everyone else but burning like a brand to her, flared white-hot. She gasped, her hand flying to her sternum. It felt like someone was carving her open from the inside. Rejection didn't just break the bond. It burned it out. Seared it away until nothing was left but scar tissue and phantom pain that would never fully heal. Nira's legs buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the platform, gasping, tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. The crowd was already moving, standing, filing toward the doors, the spectacle over. Some were laughing. Others were discussing dinner plans. A few shot pitying glances her way, but none of them stopped. Darius had already left the dais. He was walking toward the main doors with a group of young alphas, already laughing about something else, already moving on, like she'd never existed. Nira forced herself to look at her family. Theron had sat back down, his face unreadable. Next to him, her mother Ceres sat with her hands folded in her lap, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the floor. She looked small, breakable, like she wanted to disappear. Her brother Kyle was already halfway to the exit, surrounded by his friends, not even glancing back. None of them came to her. None of them even looked at her. The hall emptied fast. Within minutes, only a handful of wolves remained, servants clearing the braziers, a few elders conferring in low voices near the back. Nira stood frozen on the platform, still clutching her chest, the white dress hanging off her like a shroud. She wanted to scream, to shift and tear something apart, to make them all hurt the way she was hurting, but she couldn't even shift properly. Her wolf was too small, too weak. It curled up in the back of her mind, whimpering, broken, useless. She was useless. A hand touched her shoulder. Nira flinched, spinning around. Elder Morrigan stood behind her, leaning heavily on her staff, her expression unreadable. "Come," the old woman said quietly. "Standing here won't help." "Nothing will help," Nira whispered. Her voice sounded destroyed. "No," Morrigan agreed. "Probably not, but standing here will make it worse. Walk with me." Nira didn't have the energy to argue. She followed Morrigan down from the platform, through a side door, into a narrow corridor lit by scattered torches. They walked in silence until they reached a small antechamber, bare stone walls, a single bench, a window looking out onto the blizzard. Morrigan sat down with a heavy sigh. She gestured for Nira to sit beside her. Naira stayed standing. Why did you let him do it? The law allowed it. The law is wrong. Perhaps. Morrigan studied her with those ancient eyes. But the law is also all that keeps packs from tearing each other apart. Without it, we're just animals. We are animals, Nira said bitterly. Yes, which is why we need laws. Morrigan tapped her staff against the floor. Darius invoked his right. I couldn't stop him, even if I wanted to. Did you want to? The old woman didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. What I want rarely matters. I enforce the laws. I witness the bonds. I watch wolves make terrible decisions and live with the consequences. She paused. For what it's worth, I've never seen a rejection hurt this badly. Most wolves feel relief when a bad match is severed. You're in agony. It was fated, Naira whispered. How can a fated bond be wrong? Fate doesn't care about happiness, child. Only connection. Morrigan stood, wincing as her joints cracked. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow will be worse, but you'll survive it. Will I? Morrigan looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away, her staff tapping against stone, leaving Naira alone in the cold room. They didn't let her go home. When Naira finally left the antechamber and tried to head back to her family's quarters, 2 enforcers were waiting in the corridor. Broad-shouldered males with iron collars marking them as the Alpha's personal guard. One of them, a scarred wolf named Jace with a crooked nose and dead eyes, gestured toward a different hallway. Alpha Theron wants to see you. Nira's stomach dropped. Now? Now. They escorted her through the warren of stone passages that made up the pack's central compound. Past the kitchens, where cooks stopped chopping to stare. Past the armory, where warriors paused their training to watch her pass. Past the nursery, where mothers pulled their pups closer and whispered behind their hands. Everyone knew. Everyone was watching. The walk felt like it took hours. Theron's office was in the east wing, a wide room with a massive stone fireplace and walls lined with weapons and hunting trophies. Mounted heads of elk, bear, and rival wolves stared down with glassy eyes. Her father stood behind his desk, hands braced on the dark wood, staring down at a spread of maps and documents. Her mother sat in a chair near the fire, hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast. Kyle leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, his face carefully neutral. The enforcers shoved Nira inside and closed the door behind her. The lock clicked. Theron didn't look up. Do you know what you've cost this family? Naira's voice came out hoarse. I didn't. Do you? He slammed his hand on the desk, and she flinched hard. 3 alliances were waiting on this bond. 3. The Northern Ridge, the Eastern Valleys, and the River Packs. All of them were ready to negotiate trade routes and territory agreements based on your union with Darius. I didn't reject him, Nira said, her voice cracking. He rejected me. Because you're weak! Theron finally looked up, and the disgust in his eyes was worse than anything Darius had said. Worse than the laughter. Worse than the pain. You're a stain, Nira, an embarrassment. We've hidden it for years, made excuses, kept you out of sight during important gatherings. But now the whole pack knows, the whole territory knows, that Theron Vex's daughter is so worthless even her fated mate won't have her. Each word was a knife. Nira felt herself bleeding out, her hands shaking, her vision blurring. I can't control what I was born as, she whispered. No. Theron straightened, pulling a rolled parchment from his desk drawer. But I can control what happens next. You're leaving. The room tilted. What? Exile, Kale said from the corner. His voice was flat, almost bored, like they were discussing livestock. Father's declaring you omega non grata. You're out. Nira looked at her mother. Mom. Saris finally lifted her head. For just a second, their eyes met. Nira saw something there. Grief, maybe, or regret. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Theris looked away, her voice barely a whisper. It's better this way, Naira. For everyone. Better? Nira's voice broke completely. You're sending me into the borderlands. That's not exile, that's execution. Dramatic as always. Theron tossed a small leather bag onto the desk. It landed with a pathetic clink. You'll have supplies, 3 days' worth, Food, water, a blanket. Plenty of wolves have survived out there with less. Weak wolves don't survive out there, Naira said. You know that. Everyone knows that. Then maybe you'll surprise us. Theron's voice was ice. Or maybe you won't. Either way, you're no longer my problem. I'm your daughter. You are my daughter. He unrolled the parchment, an official decree, already signed and sealed. As of tonight, Nira Vex is no longer recognized as pack, no longer recognized as family. You're expelled from Ashclaw territory. If you return, you'll be killed on sight. The words didn't feel real. Nira kept waiting to wake up, to realize this was just another nightmare. But the pain in her chest was real. The cold stone floor beneath her feet was real. The disgust in her father's eyes was real. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Because you're a liability I can't afford. Theron rolled the parchment back up. Your mother wanted to send you to a distant outpost, let you fade away quietly. Kale suggested we arrange a marriage to a smaller pack, get something useful out of you, but I don't have time for either option. The other packs are already circling, looking for weakness. I won't let you be the crack they exploit. So you're just throwing me away. I'm cutting my losses. He looked past her, addressing the enforcers. Take her to the border holding cells. She leaves at first light. Jace grabbed her arm. Nira tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Kale said, pushing off the wall. He walked past her toward the door, pausing just long enough to add, If you're smart, you'll head south. The settlements are warmer there. You might last a week. He left without looking back. Nira looked at her mother one last time. Ceres's hands were trembling in her lap, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. But she didn't speak, didn't move, just sat there while they dragged her daughter away. The holding cell was a stone box barely large enough to stand in. No bed, no blanket, no light except what filtered through the barred window near the ceiling. Naira sat in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, shivering. The bond scar on her chest still burned, a constant reminder of everything she'd lost. She could hear voices outside, wolves passing by, going about their evening routines. Someone laughed. Someone else complained about the cold. Life moving on without her. She tried to call her wolf forward, seeking comfort in the one thing that had always been hers. But her wolf was broken. It curled up in the back of her mind, small and hurt and useless. Naira pressed her forehead against her knees and finally let herself cry. She cried for the bond that had been ripped away, for the family that had thrown her out, for the life she'd thought she might have. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen and there was nothing left inside her but emptiness. Somewhere around midnight, the door opened. Naira looked up, expecting an enforcer. Instead, her mother slipped inside, a hooded cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. She carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Mom, shh. Ceres glanced over her shoulder, then knelt down beside Naira. Up close, she looked older, tired, broken in a way Naira had never noticed before. I don't have long. Your father has guards watching. She pressed the bundle into Naira's hands. Inside, a thicker blanket, a small knife with a leather sheath, and a handful of dried herbs. It's not much, Ceres whispered, but it's better than what he gave you. Nira stared at the bundle, then at her mother. Why didn't you stop him? I tried, Ceres's voice cracked. Before the ceremony, after it, I begged him to reconsider, to let you stay, to give you another chance. But he wouldn't listen. He never listens to me. You could have fought harder. I could have. Ceres reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Nira's face. Her hand was shaking. But I'm weak too, Naira. I've been weak my whole life. I thought if I gave him strong sons, a good home, if I never caused trouble, maybe he'd value me. But he doesn't. He never has. Tears ran down her face, silent and fast. I'm so sorry, she whispered, for not protecting you, for not being stronger, for... She broke off, shaking her head. I'm just sorry. Nira wanted to be angry, to scream at her, to push her away, to tell her that sorry wasn't enough. But looking at her mother, this small, scared woman who'd spent her whole life trying to be invisible, she just felt empty. Will you be okay? Nira asked quietly. Ceres laughed, a broken sound. No, but I'll survive. I always do. She stood, pulling her hood back up. The enforcers will take you to the border at dawn. Don't fight them. Just go. Get as far away as you can and don't look back. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Ceres moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the frame. But you're stronger than you think, Naira. You always have been. You never had to be. Maybe out there you'll find what you're really capable of. She slipped out before Naira could respond. The door locked again, leaving Naira alone with her mother's offerings, and 1,000 questions she'd never get to ask. Dawn came too fast. The enforcers dragged her from the cell before the sun cleared the horizon. Outside, the blizzard had stopped, leaving the world buried in fresh snow. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of more. They marched her through the compound in silence. A few early rising wolves stopped to watch. Most didn't bother. By now, everyone knew. The disgraced Omega being thrown out. Old news. The border was marked by a line of standing stones, each one carved with warnings in the old tongue. Beyond them, the world turned white and wild. Endless snow broken only by skeletal trees and jagged black rock. The wind howled, carrying ice that stung exposed skin. Jace untied her wrists and shoved the leather bag into her arms. Past the stones, you're not pack anymore. Come back, and we kill you on sight. Understand? Naira nodded. Her throat was too tight to speak. The other enforcer, a younger male named Garrett, actually looked uncomfortable. There's a settlement about 3 days south, he said quietly. If you can make it that far, they might take you in. Might. Jace shot him a look. Don't give her hope. It's cruel. They turned and walked back toward the compound, leaving Naira standing at the border. She looked back one last time. The Ashclaw compound rose against the gray sky, all stone and smoke and solid permanence. Home. Or it had been, once. Now it was just a place she wasn't allowed to be. She turned and walked past the standing stones, into the white, into the cold, into nothing. Time stopped meaning anything. Naira walked until her legs gave out, then crawled until her hands went numb, then collapsed in the snow and lay there until the cold shocked her back to her feet. She had no idea how long she'd been walking. Hours? Days? The sky never changed, the wind never stopped, and the snow kept falling. She ate the dried meat her father had given her on the first day. It was tough, borderline rotten, and made her gag. But she forced it down, knowing it might be the last food she saw for a while. The water skin froze solid on the second day. She tried to thaw it against her body, but her body had no warmth left to give. She ended up eating snow instead, even though she knew it would make her colder. Her mother's blanket helped. The knife stayed tucked in her belt, useless for now, but reassuring. The herbs, she had no idea what to do with. On what might have been the third day, or the fifth, or the seventh, she'd lost count, she found a rocky outcrop and huddled beneath it. The wind screamed overhead, but the rocks blocked most of it. She wrapped both blankets around herself and tried to sleep. Her wolf was silent, had been since the rejection. Naira reached for it, desperate for any connection, any warmth. Nothing. It was like reaching into a void. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about dying. But that's all there was to think about out here. Dying, alone, forgotten, erased. Maybe that was easier than living. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it felt almost comforting. She could just stop, close her eyes, and let the cold take her. No more pain, no more rejection, no more struggling. But something inside her, something small and furious and stubborn, refused. Her wolf stirred. It was weak, barely a whisper. But it was there. Get up. Naira's eyes snapped open. Get up, move, fight. I can't, she whispered into the wind. I'm too weak. You're only weak if you stop. The voice wasn't just her wolf. It was deeper, older, something primal that lived in her bones. Get up. Naira dragged herself to her feet, gasping, every muscle screaming in protest. She didn't know where she was going. Didn't matter. She just moved. One step, then another, then another. The landscape blurred into white and gray. She walked through the pain, through the cold, through the exhaustion. Her mind went blank, running on pure instinct. She almost missed the cave. It was just a crack in a cliffside, hidden behind a curtain of icicles and snow. She might have walked right past it if her foot hadn't caught on a rock and sent her sprawling. She looked up, saw the opening, and crawled toward it like a dying animal. Inside, the cave was dark, damp, cold, but not as cold as outside. The wind couldn't reach her here. Naira collapsed onto the stone floor, shaking violently, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She wrapped the blankets around herself and curled into the smallest ball she could manage. Her hands were blue. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her chest still burned with the ghost of the severed bond. But she was alive. Against everything. Against all odds. She was still alive. Sleep took her fast, and with sleep came the dream. She stood in a forest, but this wasn't the frozen wasteland. This was green, alive. Trees stretched toward a sky burning red and gold, their leaves rustling in a hot wind, and the forest was on fire. Flames climbed the trunks, devouring bark and branches. The heat was immense, suffocating. Naira should have been burning, should have been screaming, but the fire didn't touch her. In the center of the inferno stood a woman. She was tall, wrapped in tattered robes that might have once been white. Silver hair fell to her waist, moving in a wind that had nothing to do with the flames. Her eyes glowed molten gold, not reflected light, but light from within. She looked at Naira and smiled. They threw you away because they feared what you'd become. Her voice echoed, layered, like 100 voices speaking at once, ancient and young, cruel and kind, human and not. They saw weakness, the woman said, stepping closer. The fire parted around her. But weakness is just power that hasn't been tempered yet. Unformed, unbroken, raw. Who are you? Naira whispered. I'm what you could be. The woman raised her hand and light poured from her palm, blinding, beautiful, terrible. I'm the power sleeping in your blood. The gift your ancestors buried because they were afraid of it, of us. I don't have power, Naira said. I'm weak. Everyone knows. Everyone is wrong. The woman's smile widened, showing too many teeth. You're not weak, Naira Vex. You're dormant. There's a difference. She pressed her glowing hand against Naira's chest, right over the bond scar. The pain was instant and overwhelming. Naira screamed, falling to her knees. Fire poured through her veins, burning away everything, the cold, the exhaustion, the shame, the fear. It burned down to her bones, to her wolf, to the core of who she was. And then it ignited. Wake up, the woman whispered, and burn. Naira woke gasping, her body convulsing. Her hands were on fire, not burning, glowing. Light pulsed beneath her skin, warm and alive, flickering like embers, gold and white, and something in between, bright enough to illuminate the cave walls. She stared at them, heart hammering, too shocked to scream. The glow faded slowly, sinking back beneath the surface. But the warmth lingered. Her hands weren't blue anymore. They were pink, alive. Naira sat up, breathing hard, her mind racing. What the hell was that? She looked down at her chest. The bond scar was still there, still burning, but underneath it she felt something else. Something warm, something waiting. She tried to summon the light again. Nothing happened. She focused harder, reaching inward the way she'd reach for her wolf, searching for the spark. Still nothing. But she'd felt it. She'd seen it. For the first time since the rejection, since the exile, since everything fell apart, she'd felt power. Her power. And deep in her chest, beneath the pain and the cold and the exhaustion, something small and fierce began to unfold. She wasn't done yet. Not even close. The light came back 3 days later. Naira had spent those days learning the cave, memorizing every crack and shadow. It wasn't much, maybe 15 feet deep, barely tall enough to stand in the back, but it was shelter. The wind couldn't reach her here. The snow piled up outside but left the interior dry. She rationed what little food remained. 2 strips of dried meat left, both small enough to fit in her palm. She ate one piece slowly, forcing herself to chew each bite 30 times, making it last. The other she wrapped in cloth and hid in a crevice. Emergency supply. Water was easier. Icicles hung from the cave entrance like teeth. She'd break one off, let it melt in her mouth. Repeat. It kept her alive. Barely. But alive was alive. The cold was the worst part. It sank into her bones, made her joints ache, turned her fingers stiff and clumsy. The blankets helped during the day. At night, when the temperature dropped and the wind screamed, they weren't enough. She'd curl into the tightest ball possible and shake until dawn. Her wolf was still broken. She could feel it in the back of her mind. Small, hurt, hiding. Every time she reached for it, trying to shift, trying to connect, it flinched away like a beaten dog. The rejection had done that, shattered something fundamental. But the light, that was different. It happened while she was trying to start a fire. She'd gathered a handful of dry moss from the cave walls, arranged it in a small pile with twigs she'd scavenged from outside. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the flint. Strike, spark, nothing. Strike, spark, nothing. Strike, spark. Her frustration boiled over. She slammed her fist against the stone floor and the impact sent a jolt through her arm. Heat flared in her chest, spreading down to her hands. The moss burst into flames. Not from the flint, from her. Nira jerked back, staring. The fire burned bright and hot, crackling cheerfully. But she hadn't struck the flint that last time. She just wanted it. And it happened. She held her hands up, turning them over. No glow this time, no visible light, but she could feel it under the surface, warm and waiting. "What are you?" she whispered to her own palms. They didn't answer. She fed the fire carefully, adding twigs and moss until it was strong enough to last. Then she sat back and stared at her hands for a long time, thinking about the dream. The burning forest. The silver-haired woman, power sleeping in your blood. Nira didn't know what that meant, but she wanted to find out. Learning to control it was like trying to catch smoke. Over the next 2 weeks, Nira experimented in the cave, trying to understand what lived beneath her skin. She'd sit cross-legged near the fire, close her eyes, and reach inward the way she'd been taught to call her wolf. Sometimes the light answered. Mostly it didn't. When it did work, it came in violent bursts, uncontrolled, wild. She'd reach for warmth, and her hands would flare so bright she had to squeeze her eyes shut. She'd try for a gentle glow and get nothing. There was no pattern, no logic she could find. It responded to emotion more than intention. When she was furious, thinking about Darius's face, her father's disgust, the laughter echoing in the bonding hall, the light came fast and scorching. When she was scared, it flickered and died. When she was calm, it ignored her completely. She burned herself twice, once badly enough that blisters rose on her palm before the light kicked in and healed them. The second time, she set her blanket on fire and had to throw it in the snow to put it out. After that, she was more careful. She started small, lighting kindling, warming her hands, creating just enough glow to see in the dark without wasting the firewood she'd collected. It took days to manage even that much consistency, but slowly, agonizingly slowly, she improved. One morning, she woke to find her hands glowing without conscious thought, just a faint shimmer responding to the cold, keeping her warm while she slept. When she realized what was happening, the glow vanished. Progress. Sort of. Food became the bigger problem. The last strip of meat ran out on day 12. Nira knew she had to hunt, but the thought terrified her. She'd never hunted alone before. In the pack, hunting was communal. Groups of wolves working together, experienced hunters teaching the young. She had none of that. Still, staying in the cave meant starving, so she forced herself outside. The world beyond the cave was brutal. Snow reached her thighs in places. The wind cut through her clothes like broken glass. Her breath fogged in front of her face, freezing on her eyelashes, making them stick together. She followed animal tracks, small ones, hoping for rabbits or ground birds. Anything she could kill without a real fight. Her mother's knife was sharp but short, not ideal for hunting. The first track she followed led to nothing. The second ended at a frozen stream where the ice was too thick to break. The third brought her to a rabbit warren, but the entrance was buried under snow and ice. She spent an hour digging, her hands going numb, before giving up. By the time the sun started setting, what little sun made it through the gray clouds, Nira was exhausted, frozen, and empty-handed. She trudged back to the cave, her legs shaking, her vision swimming. This was how she'd die. Not from the cold, from starvation. Slow and pathetic. She was almost to the cave entrance when she heard it, growling, low and mean, coming from inside her shelter. Nira froze, her heart jumping into her throat. She crept closer, staying low against the rocks, trying to see without being seen. A fox sat in her cave, tearing into her emergency meat stash. It had knocked the cloth wrapping aside and was devouring the last piece she'd saved, its muzzle dark with grease and blood. Rage exploded in Nira's chest. That was hers, her food, her survival, the only thing keeping her from complete starvation. She didn't think. She just moved. She charged into the cave, screaming, her knife raised. The fox yelped, startled, and bolted toward the entrance. Nira lunged, trying to grab it, trying to stab it, trying to do anything. The fox twisted mid-leap and bit down on her forearm. Pain lanced up her arm, hot and sharp. Nira screamed, stumbling backward. The fox released and darted past her, disappearing into the snow with her last piece of food in its mouth. Nira collapsed against the cave wall, gasping, clutching her arm. Blood seeped between her fingers, dark and fast. The bite was deep, ragged, the skin torn in multiple places. Her vision blurred. She felt lightheaded. Too much blood. She was losing too much blood. She pressed her other hand against the wound, trying to stop the flow. It wasn't working. The blood kept coming, warm and sticky, pooling on the cave floor. She was going to bleed out. Here, alone, over a piece of rotten meat and her own stupidity. The thought made her laugh. A broken, hysterical sound that echoed off the stone walls. Heat flared in her chest. Her hands started glowing. Not just glowing, burning. Gold-white light poured from her palms, so bright it hurt to look at directly. She felt the heat sink into the wound, felt something shift and move beneath her skin like living thread. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. Nira peeled her hand away, gasping, barely able to believe what she was seeing. The bite was still there. She could see the tooth marks, the torn skin, the damage. But it wasn't bleeding anymore. The edges were knitting together slowly, like watching plants grow and fast forward. Within minutes, the wound was closed, scabbed over. Still sore, still bruised purple and yellow, but sealed. Nira stared at her arm, then at her glowing hands, then back at her arm. "Holy shit," she whispered. The light faded slowly, sinking back beneath her skin. But the warmth remained, pulsing gently in her chest like a second heartbeat. She could heal. She could actually heal. Not just create light or start fires. She could heal wounds, close flesh, stop bleeding. Nira sat there for a long time, staring at the scabbed-over bite, her mind racing. This changed everything. It did. The discovery gave her courage she didn't know she had. Over the next few weeks, Nira pushed herself harder. She ventured farther from the cave, testing her limits. She learned that the healing worked best on fresh wounds, cuts, burns, bruises. Older injuries took longer, required more focus, sometimes didn't respond at all, and it only worked on her. She tried healing a bird with a broken wing and got nothing. The power stayed dormant, uninterested. The fire starting became easier with practice. She could light kindling now with just a thought, though larger fires still required fuel and patience and several attempts. But the real breakthrough came when she managed her first successful hunt. It was a rabbit, old, slow, half-starved like her. She'd tracked it for 2 hours through the snow, moving as quietly as her clumsy human form allowed. When she finally cornered it in a snowbank, she killed it with her knife. Quick, messy, necessary. She brought it back to the cave and tried to skin it. Her hands were clumsy, the knife slipped, and she cut herself twice. Both times she healed the wounds without thinking, the light coming automatically now. The rabbit meat was tough and gamey, but it was protein. Real food. She rationed it over 4 days, eating slowly, savoring every bite. And for the first time since the exile, she felt something other than despair. She felt capable. The feeling was small, fragile, easily crushed, but it was there. Spring arrived slowly in the borderlands, like it was afraid of being noticed. The snow didn't melt so much as thin out, revealing patches of frozen earth and dead grass. The wind stayed brutal, but the temperature climbed just enough to make survival slightly less impossible. Nira ventured farther from the cave, exploring the landscape with new confidence. She found a frozen stream that would probably thaw soon, a stand of pine trees with edible bark, a ridge that offered a view of the valley below, where she could sometimes spot smoke from distant campfires. And one day, she found people. Well, tracks. Boot prints in the melting snow, leading east. Recent, maybe a day old, judging by how crisp the edges were. Nira crouched beside them, studying the pattern. 3 people, possibly 4, moving together. One of them was limping. The right footprint dragged slightly, leaving a smear in the snow. Travelers. Or refugees. Out here, they were probably the same thing. She should have ignored it, kept to herself. People meant danger, complications, questions she couldn't answer. But people also meant information, supplies, maybe even news from the territories. And if she was being honest with herself, she was lonely. She followed the tracks. They led through a narrow canyon where the wind howled like something alive, then up a rocky slope that left her gasping, then down into a small valley sheltered by cliffs on 3 sides. At the bottom, she found their camp. 4 people huddled around a dying fire that barely qualified as smoke. 3 men and 1 woman, all dressed in patched furs and worn leather that had seen better decades. Their faces were gaunt, hollow-cheeked, their movements slow and careful, like everything hurt. The woman was the one limping, her right leg wrapped in bloody bandages that looked like they hadn't been changed in days. Nira watched from behind a boulder, debating. She could walk away, pretend she never saw them, stay invisible, stay safe. But the woman's leg was infected. Even from here, Nira could see the red streaks climbing toward her knee, could smell the sweet, sick scent of rot on the wind. Another few days and she'd lose the leg. Maybe her life. And Nira could help. The realization settled over her like cold water, shocking and undeniable. She could actually help someone. She stepped out from behind the boulder before she could change her mind. All 4 of them jumped, scrambling for weapons. One of the men raised a rusted sword that looked like it might break if he swung it. Another grabbed a hunting bow with no arrows in the quiver. "Easy," Nira said, raising her hand slowly. "I'm not here to fight." "Then what do you want?" The man with the sword, older, gray-bearded, with eyes that had seen too much, kept his weapon raised. His hands shook slightly. "I saw your tracks. Thought you might need—" She hesitated. "Help." "We don't need anything from strangers," the woman said. Her voice was rough, pained, tight with fever. "Keep moving." Nira looked at her leg. The bandages were soaked through, dark with old blood and worse things. "That's infected. You know that, right?" "It's fine." "It's not. Give it 3 more days and you'll be dead. Maybe 2. The woman's jaw tightened. "What do you know about it?" "Enough to see gangrene when it's staring me in the face." Nira took a step closer. The man with the sword moved to block her path. "I can help. I can heal it." That got their attention. The youngest of the group, a boy, maybe 16, with hollow eyes that looked 40, laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "You're a healer? Out here? Alone?" "Not a healer. Just, I can heal. It's different." "Prove it," the gray-bearded man said flatly. Nira pulled her knife and drew it across her palm. Quick, shallow, just enough to draw blood. The 4 travelers stared, confused at first, then shocked, as understanding dawned. She held her hand up and focused. The light came easier now, more responsive. It poured from her palm, warm and golden, sinking into the cut like water into sand. Within seconds, the wound closed. Clean, seamless. Not even a scar. She showed them her unmarked palm. Silence. Complete and total. The boy's mouth hung open. The woman leaned forward despite the pain, eyes wide. The gray-bearded man lowered his sword slowly like he'd forgotten he was holding it. "What are you?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter?" Nira met his gaze. "I can fix her leg. Do you want my help or not?" They exchanged glances, a whole conversation happening in looks and small gestures. Finally, the woman nodded. "Fine, but you try anything." "I won't." The other 2 men stepped aside. Nira knelt beside the woman, carefully unwrapping the filthy bandages. The smell hit her first, rot and infection, sweet and sickening, making her gag. The wound underneath was worse than she'd expected. A deep gash running from ankle to mid-calf, probably from a fall onto something sharp. The edges were swollen and oozing, the flesh around it an angry red-purple. Black streaks radiated outward, gangrene early stage but spreading. "This is gonna hurt," Nira warned. "Everything hurts," the woman muttered. "Just do it." Nira placed her hands on either side of the wound and focused. The light came fast, brighter than before, pouring from her palms and sinking into the damaged tissue. She felt the infection fighting back, felt the woman's body trying to reject the foreign energy. She pushed harder. The woman gasped, her hands clenching into fists. Sweat broke out on her forehead, running down her temples. Her breathing turned ragged. But she didn't pull away, didn't scream, just bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood. Slowly, agonizingly, the wound began to close. The infection burned away under the light like fog under sun. The torn muscle knitted back together. The skin sealed itself, layer by layer. When Nira finally pulled her hands away, she was shaking badly, exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical. Sweat soaked her clothes despite the cold, but the leg was healed. Still bruised, still sore-looking, but clean and closed and whole. The woman stared at it, flexing her ankle experimentally. I can move it. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't... Her voice broke. Thank you. Give it a day before you put full weight on it, Nira said, sitting back against a rock. Her vision swam. The muscles healed, but it's still weak. The gray-bearded man was still staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Who are you? Nobody. Just someone passing through. Nobody doesn't have power like that. Well, I do. Nira stood, swaying slightly. The healing had taken more out of her than expected. Her stomach growled audibly. You're welcome, by the way. Wait. The woman grabbed her arm gently. Where are you going? Back to my cave. You live in a cave? The boy asked, finding his voice. For now. Alone? Yes. They exchanged looks again. The gray-bearded man lowered his sword completely, setting it aside. We're heading to Crestfall, settlement about a week east, maybe 8 days at our pace. They're always looking for people with skills. Healers, especially. I'm not a healer. You just healed her. That's different. How? Nira didn't have an answer for that. She pulled her arm free from the woman's grip. I work alone. Out here, alone gets you killed, the woman said. Winter almost got you, didn't it? I can see it in your face, in how thin you are. We could use someone like you, and you could use... She gestured at Nira's ragged clothes, her hollow cheeks, the way her hands still trembled. A real meal, a roof that doesn't leak, people watching your back. The offer was tempting, more tempting than Nira wanted to admit. But people meant questions. Questions meant explaining where she came from, why she was alone, what she was running from. Questions meant lies, and lies meant eventually getting caught. Thanks, Nira said. But no. She turned to leave. At least take some food, the fourth man said, the one who hadn't spoken yet. He pulled a cloth bundle from his pack and tossed it to her. Payment for the leg. Nira caught it reflexively. Inside, dried meat, hard cheese, some kind of dense bread. Her mouth watered instantly. Thank you, she managed. No, the woman said. Thank you. I owe you my life. Nira nodded and walked away before the gratitude could turn into more questions. Behind her, she heard the boy say, That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Shut up and pack the camp, the gray-bearded man replied. We're moving while Kara can still walk. Nira smiled despite herself, clutching the food bundle to her chest. But word spread faster than snowmelt. Over the next month, more travelers appeared near her cave. A trapper with a broken arm who'd heard rumors of a woman who could heal. A merchant who'd been mauled by a bear and somehow found his way to her ridge. A young mother whose child had a fever that wouldn't break, desperate and terrified. Nira helped them all. She told herself it was pragmatic. Some of them paid her with food, supplies, information about the settlements, and safe routes. The trapper gave her a real coat. The merchant brought her a winter blanket that actually kept her warm. The mother left her a small pouch of silver coins. But deep down, she knew the truth. It felt good to be useful. It felt good to have people look at her with gratitude instead of disgust, with hope instead of contempt. It felt good to matter. The story started small, whispers around campfires in distant camps, a strange woman living in the frozen wastes who could heal with light. Some said she was a wandering shaman. Others claimed she was a forest spirit taking human form. The name came from a fur trader who'd gotten frostbite so bad he was about to lose 3 fingers. Nira had saved them, warming his hands with her light, until circulation returned and the blackened skin pinked up again. He'd stared at her afterward like she was something holy. "You're like a ghost," he'd said, voice full of awe. "Appearing out of nowhere, saving people, then vanishing back into the wild. The ghost healer. That's what they're calling you in Crestfall." The name stuck. Nira didn't love it, but she didn't correct it either. Let them think what they wanted. As long as they didn't know who she really was, the disgraced Omega from Ashclaw, the one thrown away like trash, she was safe. But safety was an illusion in the Borderlands. She learned that the hard way, when the raiders came. It happened on a gray afternoon, the sky heavy with unshed snow that turned everything the color of old bruises. Nero was checking her snares near the frozen stream, still frozen despite the slightly warmer weather, when she heard the screams. High-pitched, terrified, multiple voices overlapping, coming from the east. She ran toward the sound without thinking, her heart pounding, her newly acquired boots crunching through crusty snow. As she got closer, she smelled smoke, heard the clash of metal on metal, more screaming, now mixed with shouts and cruel laughter. She crested a ridge and saw the settlement below. It was small, maybe 20 structures total, mostly tents and rough wooden shacks clustered around a central fire pit. A trading post for travelers, probably. The kind of place that existed in the margins, too far from pack territory to get protection, but close enough to the routes to survive on commerce. It was burning. Raiders swarmed through the settlement like ants on a carcass. She counted at least a dozen, maybe more. Dressed in mismatched armor and furs, carrying weapons that ranged from proper swords to improvised clubs. Rogues, outcasts, wolves without packs who'd turned to violence because it was easier than starving. They were dragging people from the buildings, looting supplies, setting fires for the fun of it. Nira's first instinct was to run, hide. This wasn't her problem. These weren't her people. Getting involved meant exposing herself, risking everything. But then she saw the child. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, cornered by two raiders near a burning tent. She was crying, backed against the canvas wall with nowhere to go. Her face was smeared with soot and tears. One of the raiders, a tall male with a scarred face and missing teeth, laughed and raised his knife. "Wonder if anyone will pay ransom for this one," he said to his companion. "Doubt it. Just kill her and move on." The light in Nira's chest exploded. She didn't remember making the decision to move. One moment she was on the ridge, frozen with indecision. The next she was in the settlement, standing between the raiders and the child, her hands already glowing. "Get away from her," Nira said. Her voice didn't sound like her own. The raider with the knife, scarred face, yellow eyes, breath that reeked even from 6 feet away, laughed. "Or what, little Omega? You gonna bark at me?" He could tell what she was. The realization sent ice through her veins, but she didn't back down. Nira raised her hands. The light poured out, blinding and furious, brighter than she'd ever managed before. The raider screamed, stumbling backward, covering his eyes. His companion lunged at her with a sword, rusty but sharp enough to kill. Nira dodged on pure instinct, the blade whistling past her ear. She drove her palm into his chest. The light sank into him like a physical thing. He flew backward, slamming into a tent post hard enough to crack wood, unconscious before he hit the ground. Nira spun, her hands still glowing, searching for the next threat. The scarred raider had recovered, his eyes watering but focused. "You're dead!" he snarled, shifting mid-lunge. His wolf form was massive. Dark fur matted with old blood, yellow eyes burning with rage, teeth like daggers. He hit the ground running, closing the distance in seconds. Nira didn't have time to think. She threw her hands forward and the light exploded outward in a wave, raw and uncontrolled. The wolf slammed into an invisible wall and dropped, whimpering. He shifted back to human, scrambling to his feet, clutching his head. "What the hell are you?" he gasped. "Leave," Nira said. "Now!" He ran, stumbling, disappearing into the smoke. Nira turned to the child. "Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head, too terrified to speak, eyes wide as moons. "Go, hide in the woods. Don't come out until it's quiet." The girl ran. Nira moved deeper into the settlement, operating on instinct and adrenaline. The raiders were everywhere, but she was faster now, her body responding to reflexes she didn't know she had. She healed wounded settlers as she passed. A man with a gash across his ribs, a woman with a broken arm, a teenager bleeding from his head. Quick touches, bursts of light, just enough to stabilize them. She drove off attackers with waves of energy that sent them flying or stumbling, pulled people from burning buildings, her hands glowing bright enough to see through the smoke. It was chaos, brutal and messy and terrifying. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. By the time the raiders retreated, those who could still run, the settlement was in ruins. Half the buildings were ash and collapsed timber. Bodies lay scattered, some moving, some not. The survivors huddled together in the center, shocked and bleeding and alive. Naira stood in the middle of it all, her hands still glowing, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her clothes were torn, her face was smeared with soot and blood, some hers, most not. A man approached her slowly, older, weathered like driftwood, his arm in a makeshift sling. You saved us." "I helped," Naira said. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. "You fought off 12 raiders, alone. You healed the wounded. You pulled Mira from the fire when the rest of us were too scared to move." He stopped in front of her, staring like she was something impossible. "Who are you?" Naira looked around at the survivors. They were all staring at her now, 20-some faces, expressions ranging from awe to gratitude to fear. Mostly fear. Because she'd shown them what she could do, and power without explanation was terrifying. "Nobody," she said quietly. "Just passing through." She turned and walked toward the tree line before they could stop her, before the questions could start, before someone recognized her scent or her face or put together who she really was. But as she disappeared into the shadows, she heard them whispering. "The ghost healer. Did you see the light coming from her hands? She wasn't even armed. She threw grown wolves like they were children. What is she?" Naira didn't have an answer, but whatever she was becoming, the borderlands were starting to notice. And somewhere far to the north, in a compound built from stone and broken promises, a messenger was about to arrive with news that would make her father's blood run cold. The disgraced Omega they'd thrown away wasn't dead. She was becoming something they couldn't ignore. The messenger reached Ashclaw 6 days after the raid. His name was Torvin, a traveling merchant who made his living moving between settlements, trading information as much as goods. He'd been at the burning settlement when the raiders attacked, had watched the ghost healer fight from where he'd hidden behind an overturned wagon. He'd watched her throw grown wolves like they were made of straw. Watched light pour from her hands bright enough to leave spots in his vision. Watched her heal wounds that should have killed in seconds. And he'd recognized her scent. Faint, barely there, but unmistakable. He'd been at Naira Vex's bonding ceremony months ago, selling winter furs to visiting dignitaries. He remembered the rejection, the public humiliation, the way she'd stood there shaking while 300 wolves laughed. He remembered her face. When he arrived at the compound gates demanding to speak with Alpha Theron, the guards almost turned him away. But he mentioned Naira's name, and suddenly every door opened. Theron received him in his private office. Kale stood by the window, arms crossed, face skeptical. Saris was absent, as always. "You're certain it was her?" Theron's voice was flat, controlled. "Positive, Alpha." Torvin shifted his weight, uncomfortable under the Alpha's stare. "Same face, same scent, but she's different now, stronger, dangerous in ways I can't explain." "Explain anyway." Torvin told them everything. The light that came from her hands, the healing that closed mortal wounds in seconds, the way she'd fought off 12 armed raiders without a weapon, without shifting, using power no one had ever documented. When he finished, silence filled the room like smoke. Kale spoke first, his voice sharp with disbelief. "That's impossible. She's a weak Omega. She could barely manage a partial shift. There's no way." "I know what I saw," Torvin interrupted, then immediately looked down, realizing he'd cut off the Alpha's son. "I'm sorry. But I was there. 20 other people were there. We all saw the same thing." Theron stood slowly, walking to the window that overlooked the training grounds. Below, young wolves practiced combat forms, their movements sharp and disciplined. "How many people witnessed this?" he asked quietly. "At least 30 survivors from the settlement, plus however many raiders escaped, and she didn't hide what she did. She stood in the center of everything, glowing like a damn torch." Torvin paused. "The stories are already spreading, Alpha. Every settlement between here and the Western Ridge is talking about her." "And they're calling her what, exactly?" "The ghost healer. Some say she's a spirit. Others think she's a shaman from the old tribes. A few claim she's blessed. Torvin hesitated. She's becoming a legend. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Kael laughed, sharp and bitter. This is insane. You're telling me our disgraced Omega sister is out there playing savior, using magic that doesn't exist? The power exists, Theron said quietly, still staring out the window. I've heard the old stories. My grandfather told them when I was young. Healers from the ancient bloodlines, before the packs fractured and scattered. They had abilities we've forgotten. Abilities the first alphas buried because they feared what they couldn't control. You think she's... Kael stopped, processing. That's folklore, children's tales. Folklore starts somewhere. Theron turned from the window, his expression carved from stone. And I think we made a catastrophic mistake letting her walk out of here alive. Nira knew nothing about the messenger or the conversation happening 300 miles north. She was 4 days east of the burned settlement, moving deeper into the borderlands, trying to put distance between herself and the inevitable questions. Her pack, the small bag of supplies she'd accumulated, felt heavier with each step. Food from grateful travelers, a real winter coat from a trapper she'd healed, a water skin that didn't leak. She was surviving. More than surviving, she was living. But the wilderness had other plans. She was tracking a deer through a pine forest when she heard voices. Male, multiple, coming from a clearing ahead. Nira dropped into a crouch, moving silently through dead leaves and snow, years of training kicking in despite the months away from pack life. She peered through a gap in the branches and felt her blood freeze. 5 men stood in a rough circle around something, someone, on the ground. A young woman, maybe 18 or 19, unconscious and bound with rope. Her clothes were torn, her face bruised purple and swelling, blood crusted under her nose. One of the men kicked her casually in the ribs. She didn't respond. Think anyone will pay ransom for this one? One of them asked, rolling her over with his boot. Doubt it. No pack markings. Probably just a rogue passing through. So we have our fun and dump the body in the ravine? Why waste time? Just cut her throat now. Where's the entertainment in that? They all laughed. Rage flooded Nira's chest, hot and immediate and overwhelming. It drowned out the voice in her head, telling her to stay hidden, stay safe, keep moving. This wasn't her problem. This wasn't her responsibility. But her feet were already moving. She stepped into the clearing before she could second-guess the decision. All 5 men turned, hands dropping to weapons. They were rogues. She could tell by the mismatched armor, the feral edge to their movements, the way they positioned themselves like pack hunters who'd forgotten how to coordinate. The leader stepped forward. Stocky build, shaved head, knuckles covered in scars that looked self-inflicted. Well, hello. You lost, sweetheart? Let her go, Nira said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He grinned, revealing teeth filed to points. Or what? You gonna ask nicely? No. Then what? You gonna fight us? All 5? He looked at his companions who were spreading out, surrounding her. This should be fun. Nira raised her hands. The light came instantly, responding to her rage and fear and desperate need to help. It poured from her palms like liquid sunlight, illuminating the entire clearing in gold-white radiance. The laughter died. What the actual... The leader started. Nira didn't let him finish. The wave of energy exploded outward, slamming into all 5 men simultaneously. 2 flew backward into trees with bone-cracking force and didn't get up. A third hit the ground hard, gasping. The leader and 1 other managed to stay on their feet, but they stumbled, disoriented. Run, Nira said quietly, or the next one goes through you, not around you. The leader's eyes went wide. He'd heard the stories. Everyone in the borderlands had by now. The ghost healer who could kill as easily as she could save. He ran. The other conscious rogue followed, leaving their unconscious companions behind. Nira waited until he disappeared into the trees, then knelt beside the bound woman. She checked for serious injuries, bruised ribs, split lip, swelling around her left eye, rope, burns on her wrists, possible concussion. Bad, but not immediately life-threatening. She placed her hands on the woman's chest and let the healing light flow. Gently this time, carefully, mending the worst of the damage. The internal bleeding stopped, the swelling reduced, the rope burns faded to pink lines. The woman's eyes fluttered open, dark brown, hazy with confusion and lingering fear. "You're safe," Naira said, cutting the ropes with her knife. "They're gone." "Who?" The woman's voice cracked, dry and painful. "Who are you?" "Nobody important. Can you sit up?" She helped the woman into a sitting position. The woman swayed, dizzy, but stayed upright. "They were going to kill me," she whispered. "I was just traveling to meet my sister in Crestfall, and they just... I know, but they didn't. You're alive." Nira pulled her water skin from her pack and offered it. "Drink slowly." The woman drank, her hand shaking so badly water spilled down her chin. When she finished, she looked at Nira properly for the first time. Recognition flickered across her face. "You're her, the ghost healer, the one everyone talks about." Nira stood, brushing dirt and pine needles from her knees. "Crestfall is 2 days west. Stay on the main path, travel during daylight, hide at night. When you get there, ask for the Elder Council. Tell them what happened. They'll help." "Wait!" The woman grabbed her wrist. "I don't even know your name. How do I repay you?" "You don't need to." "But survive," Naira said. "That's payment enough." She pulled free gently and disappeared into the forest before the woman could argue further. Behind her, she heard crying, not from pain, from relief and overwhelming gratitude. Naira kept walking. What? She made it another week before they found her. Nira was sleeping in a makeshift shelter she'd built against a cliff face. Branches and packed snow and pine boughs, barely enough to block the wind but better than nothing. She'd learned to sleep light, to wake at the smallest sound. So when the smell of smoke and steel drifted through the entrance, her eyes snapped open immediately. 6 wolves surrounded her shelter, all in human form, all armed with iron-tipped weapons. The scent hit her a second later. Ashclaw. Her heart dropped into her stomach. The leader stepped into view and Nira's breath caught. Garrett, one of the enforcers who'd escorted her to the border months ago. The young one who'd looked uncomfortable the entire time, who'd told her about the southern settlements, who'd seemed almost apologetic about following orders. He didn't look uncomfortable now. He looked grim, determined, professional. "Hello, Naira," he said quietly. She was on her feet in seconds, her back pressed against the cliff wall, hands already starting to glow. "What do you want?" "Alpha Theron requests your presence." "Requests?" Naira almost laughed. 6 armed guards for a request? It's not really optional. Garrett took a step closer, hands visible and empty but ready. "You can come quietly, make this easy for everyone. Or we can do this the hard way. Your choice. I'm not Pack anymore. You exiled me. You have no authority over me. We have swords and superior numbers. That's authority enough." His voice was almost apologetic, like he regretted every word. "Please, don't make this harder than it has to be." Nira's hands blazed brighter. All 6 wolves tensed, weapons half drawn. "Don't," Garrett warned. "We've been briefed on what you can do. We know about the settlement, the raiders, all of it. We also know you're not invincible. You get tired. You bleed. You're alone. Push us, and we will put you down." Nira's mind raced, calculating odds and outcomes. 6 trained enforcers versus her. She was faster now, stronger, could heal herself. But she'd never fought this many opponents simultaneously. And iron weapons disrupted wolf abilities. Would they disrupt her light? "Why does Theron want to see me? I don't ask questions above my rank. I follow orders." Garrett gestured to 2 of his wolves. They approached slowly, cautiously, carrying iron shackles that looked old and heavy. "These are just a precaution." "I'm not wearing those." "Then we do this the hard way." Garrett's hand moved to his sword hilt. "And people get hurt. Possibly you, definitely some of us. Is that what you want?" Nira looked at the 6 faces surrounding her. Young wolves, most of them, following orders like she'd been taught to follow orders. They probably didn't even know why they were here, just that the Alpha commanded it. She could fight, probably take down 3 or 4 before they overwhelmed her. But then what? She'd be unconscious or dead, and the outcome would be the same. Sometimes surrender was the smarter play. She lowered her hands. The glow faded. "Fine." The shackles locked around her wrists with a click that sounded like finality. Iron, cold, and heavy, immediately making her feel disconnected from her power. The light didn't disappear, but it dimmed, became harder to reach. I'm sorry, Garrett said quietly, so only she could hear. For what it's worth. It's not worth much, Nira replied. They marched her through the borderlands for 7 days. 6 guards rotating shifts, never leaving her alone, never giving her an opportunity to escape. They moved fast, pushing through terrain that would have taken Nira weeks to cross alone. They had supplies, experience, coordination. She had shackles and growing dread. What did Theron want? To finish what he started? To make sure she was actually dead this time? That the ghost healer causing problems was erased permanently? Or something worse? Nira spent the journey in silence, conserving energy, testing the limits of the shackles. The iron dampened her power but didn't eliminate it. She could still feel the light beneath her skin, just muted, harder to access. If she concentrated hard enough, she could make her palms glow faintly. But doing anything useful? That would take focus and energy she didn't have while walking 12 hours a day. On the 7th day, they reached Ashclaw. The compound looked exactly as Nira remembered. High stone walls, smoking chimneys, wolves moving through courtyards with purpose and pack-mind synchronization. But seeing it now, after months in the wilderness, after surviving alone, it looked different, smaller, less impressive. Just buildings and walls and people who'd turned their backs when it mattered most. The guards marched her through the main gates. Wolves stopped mid-activity to stare. Whispers followed her like shadows. Is that Nira Vex, the dead Omega? I thought she was executed. Look at her hands. Even in shackles, they're glowing. What is she? They took her directly to the Great Hall, the same hall where Darius had rejected her, where her life had imploded, where she'd last stood as part of this pack. Theron waited inside, standing near the raised platform where the Alpha's throne sat empty. Kale stood beside him, arms crossed, face unreadable. And to Nira's surprise, Elder Morrigan was there too, leaning heavily on her staff, ancient eyes watching everything. Garrett removed the shackles but positioned himself and his wolves between Nira and the exit. Guards, not escorts. The iron came off, and Nira's power surged back immediately, flooding her system with warmth and light. She flexed her raw wrists, feeling the healing already starting. Theron studied her in silence for a long moment. You look different, he finally said. Months of trying not to die will do that. That's not what I mean. He stepped closer, circling her slowly like prey under examination. You're stronger, healthier, alive, when by all logic you should be bones in the snow. Care to explain how? I learned to survive, isn't that what you wanted? Told me to figure it out or not? Don't play games with me. Theron's voice hardened to steel. We've heard the stories. The ghost healer. The woman who fights with light. I didn't believe them until a merchant named Torvin described you in perfect detail, down to the scar on your left hand from when you were 8. Nira's stomach dropped. She remembered Torvin vaguely, a merchant who'd been at the settlement. She hadn't realized he'd recognized her. So I'll ask you again, Theron continued. What are you? I don't know.
Liar.
I'm not lying. The words came out sharper than intended. I don't know what this power is or where it came from or why I have it. It just woke up. After you threw me away to die. After everything was taken from me. It's the only reason I'm still breathing. Something flickered in Theron's eyes. Not regret. Wolves like him didn't do regret. But maybe acknowledgement. Maybe the faintest recognition that his actions had consequences. Kael spoke up from his position by the wall. She's some kind of mutation. Genetic abnormality. We should kill her before whatever she has spreads to others. Shut your mouth, Theron said without looking at him. She's not a mutation, she's a throwback. Elder Morrigan tapped her staff against the stone floor, the sound echoing. He's correct. The ancient bloodlines, the original packs before the Great Fracturing, carried abilities like this. Healing, energy manipulation, elemental affinity. It was systematically bred out over centuries because the early alphas feared what they couldn't dominate. She looked at Nira with something that might have been respect. But genetics have long memories. Sometimes the old blood surfaces, random, unpredictable, powerful. So what? Nira's voice shook despite her efforts to control it. You brought me back to study me? Lock me in a cage like some kind of experiment? No, Theron said. I brought you back because you're becoming a problem. You're drawing attention from every corner of the borderlands, building a reputation. People are seeking you out, following rumors of your location. You're becoming a symbol, Nera, and symbols are dangerous. A symbol of what? Hope. He said the word like it was poisonous. Rogues and outcasts and weak wolves hear about the ghost healer and start thinking maybe there's power outside traditional pack structures. Maybe they don't need an alpha's approval to matter. You're destabilizing centuries of social order. Nera laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed off stone walls. Good. Maybe your social order deserves to be destabilized. Theron's hand shot out, grabbing her throat. Not choking, not yet, but holding her in place. A warning wrapped in controlled violence. You don't understand what you're doing, he hissed, his face inches from hers. The pack system has rules for a reason. Hierarchy, structure, discipline. It keeps us from descending into chaos, from tearing each other apart like our ancestors did before the packs. You're teaching wolves that power comes from individuals, not community. That's how civil wars start. Nera grabbed his wrist, and her hand flared with light. Theron jerked back instinctively, releasing her. Maybe, she said, rubbing her throat. Some things are worth fighting for, even if it means war. Silence fell over the hall. Kyle broke it. She's admitted to sedition. That's grounds for immediate execution under pack law. No one's executing anyone, Theron said, though his eyes never left Nera's face. Not yet. He stepped back, composing himself, returning to the calculated alpha persona. I'm offering you a choice, Nera. One chance to walk away from this intact. I'm listening. Swear loyalty to Ashclaw again. Rejoin the pack officially. Use your abilities in service to our community, healing the injured, defending our borders, strengthening our position. In exchange, you'll have protection, resources, status, a real place here, not as a disgraced Omega, but as a valued asset. Nera stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. You're serious, she said slowly. Completely. You threw me out, called me worthless, sent me to die in the frozen wastes, and now you want me back because I'm useful? I want you where I can control you, Theron corrected. Out there, you're chaos. Here, you're an asset. It's pragmatic. For you, for everyone. Think, Nera. Out there, you're hunted. Every ambitious rogue and rival pack will eventually come for you. They'll want to capture you, study you, use you, or eliminate you as a threat. How long do you think you'll survive alone? I've done pretty well so far. Luck and novelty, both run out. Theron's voice softened slightly, taking on an almost paternal tone that made Nera's skin crawl. Here, you'd be protected, safe, family again. The word hit like a physical blow. Nera looked at this man, her father in biology only, who discarded her without hesitation, who'd watched her stand on that platform and be publicly destroyed, who'd given her 3 days of supplies and called it mercy. Now he wanted her back because she had value. No, she said quietly. Theron's expression hardened. Think carefully before you... I said no. Nera's hand started to glow, brighter now, responding to her rising anger. The guards by the door shifted nervously. I'm not your weapon. I'm not your tool. I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm nothing to you, and you're nothing to me. Then you're a threat to pack stability, Theron said flatly, and threats get eliminated. He nodded to Garrett. Lock her in the holding cells. We'll convene a council at dawn to decide her fate. The guards moved in, hands on weapons. Nera made a choice. She threw her hands forward and released everything she'd been holding back. The light didn't come out as a wave this time. It detonated. Pure energy exploded outward in all directions, a shockwave of raw power that slammed into walls and guards and furniture. The entire hall shook. Stone cracked. Candles blew out. Wolves flew backward like leaves in a storm. When the light faded, Nera stood alone in the center of destruction. Theron was on his knees 10 feet away, gasping, blood running from his nose. Kyle was unconscious against the far wall, crumpled like a broken doll. Elder Morrigan had somehow stayed upright, leaning heavily on her staff, staring at Nera with something between awe and fear. Garrett and his wolves were scattered across the floor, groaning, trying to stand. Nera's hand still glowed, brighter than ever, the power coursing through her veins like molten gold. I'm leaving, she said. Her voice echoed in the sudden silence. Don't follow me. Don't send hunters. Don't make me come back. She walked toward the main doors. Naira. Theron's voice stopped her. She turned. He was standing now, one hand braced against a pillar, blood smeared across his face. His eyes blazed with rage and something else, fear maybe, or grudging respect. If you walk out that door, you're an enemy of this pack. We will hunt you, we will find you, and we will end you. That's not a threat. That's pack law. Nira met his gaze without flinching. You already tried to end me once, she said quietly. I'm still here. How'd that work out? She pushed open the doors and walked into the courtyard. Wolves scattered as she passed, giving her wide berth. Some looked terrified. Others looked awed. A few, mostly young Omegas she'd known in passing, looked hopeful. She made it to the main gates before anyone tried to stop her. A single figure stepped into her path. Darius. He looked the same, carved features, alpha confidence, the wolf who'd rejected her in front of everyone. But standing here now, after everything, he looked smaller, less important. You can't leave, he said. Nira almost laughed. Watch me. I'm serious. Theron will send the entire pack after you. You won't survive. Why do you care? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He opened his mouth, closed it, struggled for words. I don't want you dead, he finally said. You rejected me, publicly, called me worthless. You don't get to care now. I was wrong. The words came out strained, like they physically hurt. I felt the bond. I lied when I said I didn't. I felt it, and I was terrified because you were weak, and I was supposed to be strong, and I couldn't. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I was a coward. I'm sorry. Naira stared at him for a long moment, then she walked past him without a word. Naira, wait. The bond is dead, she said over her shoulder. You killed it. We're done. She walked through the gates and didn't look back. Behind her, the compound erupted into controlled chaos. Alarms sounded. Orders were shouted. Hunters would be mobilized within the hour. Nira ran. She made it deep into the borderlands before the howls started behind her, at least a dozen wolves. Maybe more. Theron had sent his best hunters. She pushed her exhausted body harder, calling on reserves she didn't know she had. The light flickered in her hands, unstable, responding to her desperation. Then she burst into a clearing and stopped dead. Raiders. At least 20 of them, surrounding a small merchant caravan. They were looting wagons, dragging prisoners into the open, laughing as people begged for mercy. Nira recognized faces from the caravan, including the gray-bearded man she'd healed months ago. He was on his knees, hands bound, a raider holding a knife to his throat. The howls behind her grew louder. The Ashclaw hunters were maybe 2 minutes away. She was trapped between two enemies with nowhere left to run. Nira looked at the terrified prisoners, at the laughing raiders, at the forest behind her where wolves were coming to kill her. She thought about running, saving herself, leaving these people to their fate. Then she thought about who she'd been, powerless, abandoned, left to die, and who she'd become, someone who could actually help. She stepped into the clearing, her hands blazing with light. Let them go, she said. Every raider turned, 20 pairs of eyes locked on her. The lead raider, a massive male with a scarred face and dead eyes, grinned slowly. Well, the ghost healer herself. We've been looking for you. There's a bounty on your head from at least 3 packs. Let them go and I'll surrender. Why would we negotiate when we can just take everything? He raised his sword. Kill her! Collect the body! The raiders charged. Naira didn't hold back. The light poured from her in waves, in focused beams, in explosive bursts that sent bodies flying. She moved through them, like a storm, given human form, healing her own wounds as fast as they inflicted them, striking back with power that cracked bones and shattered weapons. It was brutal, desperate, overwhelming, and she was winning. But then the Ashclaw hunters burst into the clearing from the opposite side. Garrett led them, sword drawn, his face a mask of grim determination. He saw Naira surrounded by raiders, saw the prisoners bound and bleeding, saw the destruction. For one suspended moment, their eyes met across the chaos. Naira waited for him to attack her. Instead, Garrett did something impossible. He turned his sword on the raiders. Ashclaw pack, he roared. Protect the prisoners. Neutralize the rogues. His hunters crashed into the raiders from behind, turning the fight into absolute pandemonium. Nira didn't understand, didn't have time to question or analyze. She just fought alongside wolves who'd been hunting her seconds ago, fighting a common enemy. Together, they drove the raiders back. The ones who could still move retreated into the forest, abandoning their dead and wounded. When the dust settled and the screaming stopped, Nira stood facing Garrett across blood-soaked ground. Both of them were bleeding, gasping for air, weapons still raised. The freed prisoners huddled together near the wagons, staring at the scene in shock. "Why?" Nira asked, her voice raw. Garrett lowered his sword slowly. "Because those prisoners include wolves from the Eastern Valley Pack. Killing you isn't worth starting a territorial war." He paused, something complicated crossing his face. "And because you saved my sister 3 weeks ago, the woman with the infected leg. Her name is Kara, my younger sister." Memory clicked into place. The gray-bearded man's group, the woman she'd healed. "I didn't know," Nira said. "I know. You helped her anyway." Garrett sheathed his sword completely. "Go, run, before my orders override my conscience." "Theron will never know I let you escape." Garrett's voice dropped to barely audible. "But Nira, don't come back. Ever. Next time we meet, I won't have a choice. I'll have to kill you." Nira nodded once and ran, disappearing into the trees. Behind her she heard the gray-bearded man's shaking voice. "Who was that woman?" Garrett's response was quiet but clear. "Someone who should have been protected, not destroyed." Nira ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, finally collapsing in a ravine miles from the clearing. She lay in the dirt and snow, staring up at the gray sky, her whole body shaking. She'd made an enemy of her birth pack. She'd been saved by wolves sent to kill her. And somewhere in the chaos and violence, she'd become exactly what Theron feared most. Not just a symbol, a force they couldn't control, couldn't contain, couldn't erase. The ghost healer was real. And she was just getting started. Nira stayed in the ravine for 3 days, not out of fear, though fear was certainly present, coiled tight in her chest like a living thing, but because she needed to think, to plan, to decide what came next. She couldn't keep running forever. The borderlands were vast but not infinite. Sooner or later, Theron's hunters would find her again. Or the raiders. Or one of the other packs who'd heard the stories and decided she was either a threat to be eliminated or a prize to be captured. Running wasn't sustainable. But what was the alternative? She sat with her back against the ravine wall, watching her hands glow in the darkness. The light came easily now, responsive to the smallest thought. She could control it, dim it to barely visible, or flare it bright enough to illuminate 50 feet in every direction. She'd spent months afraid of this power, confused by it, struggling to understand where it came from and what it meant. But sitting here in the cold and dark, she realized something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't afraid anymore. The power was hers, part of her. And she was done apologizing for it. On the 4th day, she left the ravine and started moving with purpose, not away from something, toward it. The settlement of Crestfall sat in a valley 7 days east, protected by natural cliffs on 3 sides and a wooden palisade on the 4th. It was larger than most borderland outposts, maybe 200 permanent residents, plus however many travelers passed through at any given time. Nira had heard about it from multiple sources. The gray-bearded man had mentioned it. The woman she'd saved from the rogues had been traveling there. Even Garrett had referenced it during that first encounter, months ago. It was a place where outcasts gathered, where pack rules mattered less than survival skills, where someone with unusual abilities might find something resembling acceptance, or at least not get immediately killed. She reached the settlement on a gray afternoon, the sky heavy with snow that refused to fall. The gates were open, guarded by 2 wolves who looked more bored than vigilant. They straightened when they saw her approaching. "State your business," the older guard said, hand resting on his sword hilt. "I'm looking for work," Nira said. "Heard you take in travelers." "Depends on the traveler." His eyes narrowed, studying her. "You look familiar. Have we met?" "Doubt it." "You got a name?" Nira hesitated for half a second. "Nira." Recognition flashed across his face. "Nira. Just Nira." "Just Nira, sir." The guard exchanged a look with his companion, younger, nervous, already backing away slightly. You're the ghost healer, the younger one said. Not a question. I'm a healer, Naira confirmed. Among other things. You're the one who saved the convoy from the raiders, the older guard said slowly, and the one who destroyed half of that settlement fighting off that attack 3 weeks back. I helped where I could. Silence stretched between them. The older guard's hand hadn't moved from his sword, but he hadn't drawn it either. Finally, he stepped aside. Elder Council will want to meet you. Straight through, main hall, can't miss it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might not like what they have to say. Nira walked through the gates into organized chaos. The settlement was built in layers, outer ring for trading, middle ring for living quarters, inner ring for communal spaces. Wolves moved through narrow streets carrying supplies, haggling over goods, arguing about territory assignments. Children ran between buildings, playing games that looked dangerous and unsupervised. Everyone stopped to stare as she passed. Whispers followed her like wind. That's her. The ghost healer. I heard she killed 20 raiders single-handed. I heard she brought someone back from death. My cousin said she glows like the moon. Naira kept her head down and walked faster. The main hall was a large wooden structure at the settlement's center, built from logs that had probably been dragged from miles away. Inside, a long table sat surrounded by mismatched chairs. 5 wolves occupied those chairs, 3 male, 2 female, all looking old enough to have survived more winters than they should have. The eldest, a silver-haired woman with scars across her face and hands, stood when Nira entered. So, she said, the rumors are true. The ghost healer walks among us. I'm just a person, Nira said, with some unusual abilities. Unusual is an understatement from what we've heard. The woman gestured to an empty chair. Sit. I'm Elder Kessa. This is our council. We govern Crestfall, such as it is. Nira sat. The other 4 council members studied her with varying expressions: curiosity, suspicion, calculation, hope. You've caused quite a stir in the borderlands, Kessa continued. Saved settlements, healed the dying, fought off raiders, destroyed property in the Ashclaw compound, and walked away alive. She leaned forward. The question is, what do you want? A place to stay, Nira said honestly. Somewhere I don't have to keep running. And in exchange, I'll help. Healing, defending, whatever's needed. I'm not looking for special treatment. Just a chance to stop looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes. One of the male elders, broad-shouldered, missing an eye, spoke up. You realize you've made powerful enemies. Ashclaw has put out word that you're to be captured on sight, dead or alive, though they prefer alive. Apparently your father wants to handle your execution personally. The word should have hurt. They didn't. Naira had burned through all her capacity for pain where Theron was concerned. I'm aware, she said. Harboring you makes us a target, the one-eyed elder continued. Why should we risk pack retaliation? Because I can help you survive, Nira said. Winter's coming. Raiders are getting bolder. Settlements are being attacked weekly. You need healers. You need defenders. You need someone who can do both. We need someone who won't bring an army down on us, another council member said. A thin woman with white hair and sharp eyes. They'll come whether I'm here or not, Nira said. The borderlands are destabilizing. Pack territories are shrinking. Resources are scarce. War is coming regardless. At least with me here, you have a chance of surviving it. Silence fell over the table. Kessa studied Nira for a long moment. Show us. The power everyone talks about. Nira pulled her knife and drew it across her palm. Quick, deep, enough to make several council members wince. Blood welled up, dripping onto the table. She held her hand out and focused. The light came instantly, pouring from the wound like liquid gold. The cut sealed itself in seconds, leaving unmarked skin behind. She showed them her palm. Not even a scar. That's healing, Kessa said. What about the rest? Nira stood, walked to the fireplace where logs sat waiting to be lit. She raised her hand and released a controlled burst of light. The logs burst into flames. And defense? The one-eyed elder asked. Nira turned, faced the far wall, and released a wave of energy. Not full strength, she didn't want to destroy their hall, but enough to demonstrate. The air shimmered. Several chairs skidded backward. A tapestry on the wall rippled violently. When she lowered her hand, every council member was staring. Satisfied? Nira asked. Kessa smiled slowly. You can stay, but there are conditions. I'm listening. You help defend this settlement. You heal our wounded without question or payment. You train anyone willing to learn basic defense. And you swear an oath that you will not use your power against the people of Crestfall. Agreed. One more thing. Kessa's expression hardened. If Ashclaw comes for you, you don't hide behind our walls. You face them outside the settlement. We won't sacrifice our people for your vendetta. Fair enough. Kessa extended her hand across the table. Then, welcome to Crestfall, Ghost Healer. Try not to burn it down. Nira shook her hand and felt something shift in her chest. For the first time in months, she had a home. Word spread through Crestfall faster than wildfire. By evening, Nira had a small cabin on the settlement's eastern edge. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof that mostly didn't leak. But it was hers. By the next morning, people started showing up. A mother with a sick child, a hunter with a badly set broken leg that had healed wrong, an elderly wolf with joints so arthritic he could barely walk, a young woman with scars from a raider attack that had never properly closed. Nira helped them all. She set up a makeshift healing station in her cabin. Nothing organized, just people sitting wherever they could fit while she moved between them, her hands glowing, mending wounds and easing pain. Some injuries she could heal completely. Others required multiple sessions. A few were beyond her ability. Old scars too embedded, damage too severe, illnesses she didn't understand. But she helped where she could, and people noticed. Within a week, Nira had become essential to Crestfall's survival. The council started sending her to investigate reports of raider activity. She'd track them down, heal any wounded settlers, and drive off the attackers with displays of power that left witnesses stunned. Within 2 weeks, other settlements started sending messengers. Could the ghost healer come help with an outbreak of fever? Could she defend their borders from an aggressive wolf pack? Could she teach their healers her techniques? Nira did what she could, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. One afternoon, a familiar face appeared at her cabin door. The gray-bearded man from the caravan. He looked healthier now, less gaunt, standing straighter. Didn't expect to see you again, Nira said. Didn't expect to be alive to see you again, he replied. I'm Marcus, by the way. Don't think we were ever properly introduced. Nira. I know. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. I came to say thank you for saving Kara, for saving me and my crew from those raiders. You didn't have to help, but you did. It's fine. It's not fine. You risked everything. Marcus paused. I also came to warn you. Ashclaw has tripled the bounty on your head. 500 gold marks, dead or alive. Every mercenary and rogue pack between here and the northern ridge is hunting you. Nira's stomach sank. 500? That's enough to retire comfortably. Yeah. Marcus looked grim. Theron wants you bad. He's spreading stories that you're dangerous, unstable, a threat to pack society. Half the territory believes him. And the other half? Thinks you're a hero. Marcus smiled slightly. The outcasts, the weak, the ones the packs have abandoned, they're flocking to the borderlands hoping to find you. You're becoming something bigger than just a healer, Nira. You're becoming hope. The words settled over her like heavy snow. I don't want to be hope, she said quietly. I just want to survive. Too late for that. You already are. Marcus turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Kara wants to meet you, to thank you properly. She's here in Crestfall helping with supply management. She doesn't need to saw it. She does. She knows what you did cost you everything. Least she can do is look you in the eye and say thank you. He left before Nira could argue. She sat in her cabin for a long time, thinking about hope and survival, and the difference between the two. 3 weeks after Nira arrived in Crestfall, the first attack came. Raiders, at least 30 of them, organized and well-armed. They hit the settlement at dawn, coming from the unprotected northern approach, clearly expecting easy pickings. They weren't prepared for Nira. She met them at the palisade alone, her hands already blazing. Turn around, she called out. Last warning. The lead raider, a massive male with tribal scars and dead eyes, laughed. You're the one they call Ghost Healer? You're smaller than the stories say. Stories tend to exaggerate. Guess we'll find out. He raised his hand, signaling the attack. 30 raiders charged. Nira released everything she'd been holding back. The light erupted in waves, in focused beams, in explosive bursts that sent bodies flying like ragdolls. She moved through them like a force of nature, healing herself instantly when weapons found flesh, striking back with power that shattered bones and weapons. It was over in minutes. Half the raiders were unconscious. The other half were running, abandoning their weapons, disappearing into the forest. The lead raider was on his knees, staring at Naira with something between terror and awe. "What are you?" he gasped. "Someone you shouldn't have underestimated." Naira stepped closer, her hands still glowing. "Spread the word. Crestfall is protected. Anyone who attacks this settlement answers to me." "You can't protect everywhere. Watch me." She released one more burst of energy, slamming him backward into unconsciousness. When she turned, the entire settlement was watching from the walls, 200 faces staring at her in shocked silence. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire settlement was cheering, shouting her name, celebrating. Naira stood there, covered in other people's blood, her hands glowing like miniature suns, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not hope, recognition. She mattered, not because of pack status or faded bonds or her father's approval, because of what she could do, what she chose to do. Elder Kessa approached, moving through the crowd. She stopped in front of Naira and studied her for a long moment. "You just declared war on every raider pack in the borderlands," she said. "I know. They'll come for you, all of them, together." "Let them come," Kessa smiled slowly. "You're either the bravest wolf I've ever met, or the stupidest." "Can't I be both?" "Fair point." Kessa raised her voice, addressing the crowd. "Today, the ghost healer defended our home against impossible odds. Today, she proved that Crestfall will not be prey. Today, we stand together." The crowd erupted in cheers. Naira looked out at the faces, young and old, strong and weak, pack wolves and rogues and outcasts, people who'd been abandoned, rejected, thrown away just like her, people who deserved protection. "I need volunteers," she called out. The crowd quieted. "I can't be everywhere at once, but I can teach you to defend yourselves. Basic combat, tactical positioning, how to fight as a unit instead of individuals. Who's willing to learn?" 20 hands shot up immediately, then 40, then 60. By the time the sun set, Naira had over 100 volunteers ready to train. She spent the next month building something unprecedented in the borderlands, an army of outcasts. She taught them combat techniques she'd learned in Ashclaw, pack fighting formations, coordinated attacks, how to use terrain advantage. She showed the ones with even minimal abilities how to enhance their natural strengths. And slowly, word spread. The ghost healer wasn't just defending one settlement. She was building a force. Other settlements sent representatives. Could their people join the training? Could Naira help establish defensive networks? Could she broker alliances between borderland communities? Naira said yes to everything. Within 2 months, she'd connected 7 settlements, established trade routes, created a communication system using runners and signal fires. The borderlands were organizing. And in Ashclaw, Theron was paying attention. The council meeting happened on a cold morning when frost turned everything silver. Theron sat at the head of the table, Kyle on his right, Elder Morrigan on his left. Around them, the pack's senior members, warriors, trackers, strategists. "The situation has escalated beyond containment," Theron said without preamble. "Naira Vex has established herself as a borderland leader. 7 settlements now fall under her protection. She's training an army, creating alliances, destabilizing our territory claims." "She's one wolf," Kale said. "How much damage can—" "Significant damage," Theron interrupted. "She's not alone anymore. She has followers, resources, organization." He looked around the table. "The borderlands are unifying under her influence. If we don't act soon, we'll have a rival power structure on our doorstep." "So we mobilize," one of the warriors said. "Send a force. Capture or kill her. End this." "It's not that simple," Elder Morgan said quietly. "She's become a symbol. Killing her now creates a martyr. The movement continues without her, possibly stronger." "Then what do you suggest?" Theron's voice was ice. Morgan met his gaze. "Diplomacy." The room erupted in protests. Theron raised a hand, silencing them. "Explain. She wants recognition, legitimacy, safety for the outcasts she's protecting." Morgan tapped her staff against the floor. "Offer her a treaty. Official recognition of borderland territory in exchange for peace. Establish boundaries, trade agreements, non-aggression pacts. You want me to negotiate with a rogue Omega who destroyed my hall and assaulted pack members? I want you to prevent a war you can't win. Morgan's voice hardened. She has power you don't understand and followers willing to die for her. You have pride and tradition. Which do you think prevails in actual combat? Silence fell over the table. Theron stared at the map spread before him, showing pack territories and borderland settlements. The gaps between them were shrinking. Send a messenger, he finally said. Arrange a meeting, neutral territory. I'll hear what she has to say. And if she refuses, then we go to war. Theron's expression was carved from stone, and we finish what we started. The messenger reached Crestfall 3 days later. His name was Victor, a senior diplomat from Ashclaw. He carried papers sealed with Theron's mark and an expression that suggested this was the last place he wanted to be. Naira met him in the main hall, Elder Kessa and Marcus flanking her. Victor looked surprised to see her, cleaned up, healthy, confident, not the broken Omega they'd exiled. Alpha Theron requests a meeting, Victor said, handing her the sealed documents. Neutral territory to discuss terms of coexistence. Nira broke the seal and read. The letter was formal, diplomatic, completely void of emotion. It outlined a proposal for territorial recognition and trade agreements. It was everything she'd wanted months ago, and it felt like a trap. Why now? She asked. Because the alternative is war, Victor said bluntly, and nobody wins that. Tell Theron I'll consider it. He needs an answer within the week. He'll get one when I'm ready. Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I'll relay your response. After he left, Kessa turned to Naira. You're actually considering this? I'm considering all options. It's a trap. Has to be. Maybe. Naira looked at the letter again. Or maybe he's realized he can't win by force. Either way, I need to know what he's really offering. Marcus spoke up. You walk into a meeting with Theron, you might not walk out. Then I'll make sure I'm not alone. Nira met their eyes. If I go with witnesses, people he can't disappear, and I go armed. You're always armed, Kessa said, gesturing at Naira's hands. Exactly. The meeting was set for the following week, in a clearing halfway between Ashclaw territory and Crestfall. Neutral ground, theoretically. Naira arrived with 20 wolves, her best fighters, people she trusted. They positioned themselves around the clearing, visible but non-threatening. Theron arrived with an equal number, including Garrett and several enforcers Nira recognized. Father and daughter faced each other across 10 feet of frozen ground. Theron looked older than Nira remembered. Gray had crept further into his hair. New lines carved his face, but his eyes were the same, hard, calculating, giving nothing away. You've been busy, he said. So have you. 500 gold marks is flattering. You've earned it. Theron gestured around the clearing. This is quite the force you've assembled. People tend to follow someone who protects them instead of throwing them away. Direct hit. Something flickered in Theron's expression. I was wrong, he said quietly. About you, about what you were capable of. I underestimated you. Nira waited. There had to be more. But that doesn't change the reality. You're building a rival power structure. You're destabilizing established territories. You're teaching outcasts they don't need traditional packs. Theron stepped closer. You're creating chaos. I'm creating safety, Naira countered. For people the pack's abandoned. For wolves who don't fit your rigid hierarchies. For anyone who believes there's another way to survive. And you think that's sustainable? I think it's necessary. They stared at each other, years of pain and anger and complicated history hanging between them. Finally, Theron pulled out a rolled parchment. I'm prepared to offer official recognition of borderland territory. Establish boundaries, create trade agreements, allow your settlements autonomy in exchange for peace. Nira took the document, reading carefully. It was generous, more generous than she'd expected. Territory rights, resource sharing, protection agreements. Too generous. What's the catch? She asked. You swear loyalty to Ashclaw as the primary pack authority. Your settlements become satellite territories under our protection. There it was. So I give up autonomy in exchange for your approval. You gain legitimacy and protection. I already have both. Nira handed the document back. Try again. Theron's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. No. You made the mistake when you threw me away. I'm just living with the consequences. Nira turned to leave. You want peace? Recognize borderland autonomy completely. No loyalty oaths. No pack authority. Equal standing. Otherwise, we're done here. Nira... She stopped, looking back. Theron's carefully controlled mask cracked slightly. Don't do this. Don't force my hand. You forced mine first, Nira said quietly. Now you get to live with how that turned out. She walked away, her people falling into formation around her. Behind her, she heard Theron's voice, barely audible. She's more alpha than any of you will ever be. The words followed her all the way back to Crestfall. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Nira smiled. She'd proven them all wrong. The weak Omega they'd discarded had become the leader they'd never deserved, and this was only the beginning. War came to the Borderlands 3 weeks later, not from Ashclaw, as Nira had expected, from somewhere worse. The Coalition. 5 Alpha Packs from the Northern Territories had formed an alliance, united by a single goal: eliminate the Borderland threat before it spread. They saw what Nira was building: autonomous settlements, wolves living outside traditional pack structures, power that didn't bow to Alpha authority, and they recognized it for what it was: a revolution. The Coalition army arrived at dawn, 200 strong, moving in coordinated formations that spoke of professional military training. They bypassed Crestfall's outer defenses and hit 3 smaller settlements simultaneously, burning buildings and capturing anyone who resisted. By the time Nira got word, 12 people were dead and 40 more were missing. She stood in Crestfall's main hall, staring at the map Marcus had spread across the table. Red marks indicated attack sites. Black marks showed confirmed casualties. They're not raiding, Marcus said grimly. They're exterminating, trying to destroy the entire network before we can mount a defense. How many fighters do we have? Nira asked. Maybe 120 trained, another 60 who can hold a weapon but aren't ready for real combat, against 200 professional soldiers. Yeah. Elder Kessa slammed her hand on the table. We can't win this with numbers. We need strategy. Hit them where they're weak. Avoid direct confrontation. No, Nira interrupted. We end this. Today. All of it. Everyone turned to stare at her. You want to engage 200 Coalition fighters with our people? Marcus's voice climbed. That's suicide. Not if I'm leading. Nira's hand started to glow, bright enough to cast shadows across the room. They came here to eliminate a threat. Let's show them exactly what kind of threat they're dealing with. Nira, I'm done hiding, done running, done letting other people dictate terms. She met each of their eyes in turn. Gather everyone who can fight. We move in 1 hour. Kessa studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll spread the word. But if this goes wrong, it won't. You don't know that. I do. Nira's voice was absolute certainty. Because I'm not fighting for territory or pride or revenge anymore. I'm fighting for them. For every wolf those packs threw away. And I don't lose when it matters. The gathered force looked smaller than Nira had hoped. 137 wolves armed with whatever weapons they could scavenge. Swords, axes, hunting bows, improvised spears. Against the Coalition's professional army with proper armor and training. But what they lacked in equipment, they made up for in desperation. These were wolves with nothing left to lose. Outcasts who'd been rejected, abandoned, told they didn't matter. They'd found something worth protecting in the Borderlands. Each other. A chance at life outside pack hierarchies. Hope. They'd fight like demons to keep it. Nira stood before them, the morning sun breaking through gray clouds behind her. I won't lie to you, she said, her voice carrying across the assembled fighters. We're outnumbered. They have better weapons, better training, better everything. The smart play is to scatter, hide, hope they lose interest and leave. She paused, letting that sink in. But we're not going to do that, because if we run now, they'll hunt us down one by one. If we hide, they'll burn every settlement until there's nowhere left to hide. The only way forward is through them. How? Someone called out from the back. How do we beat an army? By being what they fear most. Nira raised her hands, letting the light blaze. by proving that power doesn't come from pack status or bloodlines or alpha approval. It comes from here. She touched her chest. From choosing to fight for something bigger than ourselves. She lowered her hands, the glow fading. I was rejected by my mate, exiled by my family, left to die alone. They said I was worthless, weak, nothing. Her voice hardened. They were wrong, and today we show every alpha pack in these territories exactly how wrong they were. The crowd erupted in shouts and howls. Naira let them release the energy, then raised her hand for silence. The coalition is camped 5 miles north near the river bend. They expect us to defend our settlements, to wait for them to attack. We're going to do the opposite. We're hitting them first, hitting them hard, and we're not stopping until they retreat or surrender. And if they don't? Marcus asked quietly. Nira met his gaze. Then we make them wish they had. The coalition camp was organized military precision, tents in neat rows, perimeter guards, supply wagons positioned for quick access. Sentries patrolled in pairs, alert and professional. They never saw Nira's force coming. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. Nira led the center charge, her hands blazing like twin suns. 50 wolves flanked left, another 50 right, the remaining 37 providing range support with bows. The coalition fighters scrambled for weapons, but Naira was already among them. She moved through their ranks like wildfire, her power erupting in waves that sent soldiers flying. She healed her own wounds instantly when blades found flesh, struck back with focused beams of light that shattered shields and armor. Behind her, the borderland fighters followed her breach, pouring into the camp with desperate fury. It should have been a massacre. The coalition had numbers, training, superior equipment, but they'd never fought someone like Naira. She was everywhere at once, pulling wounded fighters back from death, throwing enemy soldiers with bursts of energy, creating walls of light that blocked arrows and blades. The coalition tried to surround her, tried to overwhelm her with coordinated attacks. She broke their formations like they were made of paper. The battle raged for 20 brutal minutes. Then a horn sounded from the coalition's command tent. Their soldiers began retreating in organized lines, falling back toward the river. Nira pushed forward, her fighters following, driving them back. They'd almost reached the command tent when someone stepped out. A massive alpha male, easily 7 feet tall, covered in ceremonial armor marked with 5 different pack symbols. The coalition leader. His presence hit like a physical force, pure alpha dominance, the kind that made lesser wolves drop their eyes instinctively. He stared at Naira, and she stared back. "You're the ghost healer," he said. His voice was deep, resonant, carrying despite the chaos around them. "The Omega who thinks she can challenge pack order." "I'm the Omega who's kicking your army's ass," Nira replied. "You want to rephrase that?" His eyes narrowed. "You've won a battle, not the war." "Then let's finish it, you and me, right now." Nira stepped forward. "Your soldiers stand down, mine stand down. We settle this." The Alpha laughed. "You challenge me to single combat? You're barely 5.5 feet tall. And yet your army is running." Nira's hands blazed brighter. "Scared?" Something dangerous flickered in his expression. "I accept." He shifted mid-lunge. His wolf form was enormous, black fur, eyes like molten gold, muscles that could crush bones. He hit the ground running, closing the distance in seconds, jaws open wide enough to take her head off. Naira didn't move. She raised both hands and released everything. The light exploded outward in a detonation that shook the ground. The alpha wolf slammed into an invisible barrier and dropped, yelping, shifting back to human form. He tried to stand, couldn't. His legs wouldn't support him. Nira walked over slowly, her hands still glowing, and stood above him. "You came here to eliminate a threat," she said quietly. "You wanted to destroy the borderlands before we could challenge your authority, before other wolves realized they don't need alphas like you to survive." She knelt down, bringing her face level with his. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off your coalition. You're going to return to your territories and tell every alpha pack what you learned here today. That the borderlands are protected, that anyone who attacks us answers to me, that the old ways, dominance, hierarchy, throwing away anyone who doesn't fit, are over. You can't." "I just did." Nira stood. "Your soldiers are watching. Your alliance is broken. Go home, before I change my mind about letting you leave alive." The Alpha stared at her for a long moment, something between rage and grudging respect in his eyes. Then he shifted back to wolf form and ran. His soldiers followed. Within minutes, the coalition army was retreating across the river, leaving their wounded and dead behind. The borderland fighters erupted in cheers. Nira stood in the center of the abandoned camp, breathing hard, her hands still glowing. Around her, wolves she'd trained and fought beside were celebrating, crying, embracing. They'd won. Against impossible odds, against a professional army, against everything the old pack system could throw at them. They'd won. Marcus appeared at her elbow, grinning despite a cut across his forehead. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of crazy. Did we lose anyone? Nira asked. His smile faded. 3 dead, 15 wounded, most not serious. Could have been so much worse. 3 is still 3 too many. It's war, people die, but because of you, hundreds more lived. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. You did it, Nira. You actually did it. She looked around at the celebrating fighters, at the abandoned coalition camp, at the sun breaking through clouds like the world was acknowledging something had changed. We did it, she corrected. All of us. News of the battle spread through the territories like wind through dry grass. The coalition defeated by borderland outcasts. 5 alpha packs humiliated by a rejected Omega. The ghost healer had become something more than legend. She'd become real, undeniable, dangerous. Other settlements started sending delegations. Could they join the Borderland Alliance? Could Nira help establish their defenses? Could they learn from her, fight beside her, be part of what she was building? Within a month, the Borderland network had doubled in size. Within 2, it had tripled. Wolves from across the territories were abandoning traditional packs, seeking the freedom and acceptance they'd never found under Alpha rule. Some came alone, others brought families, all of them looking for the same thing, a chance to matter, and Nira gave it to them. But success brought new problems. Managing 12 settlements required organization beyond what she'd built. Food distribution, resource allocation, defense coordination, conflict resolution. It was overwhelming. She couldn't do it alone, so she didn't try. She established a council system, putting leaders from each settlement in positions of authority. She trained deputies to handle healing duties when she couldn't be everywhere. She created communication networks and trade agreements and laws that protected the vulnerable without crushing individual freedom. She built something unprecedented, not a pack, not a kingdom. Something in between, a coalition of independent communities that protected each other without demanding submission. The Borderlands were becoming a nation, and in Ashclaw, Theron was forced to watch his worst nightmare unfold. The second meeting happened 4 months after the coalition defeat. Theron requested it this time, sending a formal delegation with terms that acknowledged borderland sovereignty. No tricks, no loyalty oaths, no attempts at dominance, just recognition of reality. They met in the same clearing, but this time Nira arrived with 50 wolves, leaders from across the borderlands, witnesses to whatever happened next. Theron looked older, tired, like the weight of tradition was finally crushing him. "You've won," he said without preamble. "The borderlands are yours. I'm here to negotiate borders and trade agreements, nothing more." "What changed?" Nira asked. "Everything." Theron gestured vaguely northward. 3 more packs have fractured in the last month. Wolves are leaving in droves, seeking the borderlands. The old system is collapsing, and fighting you just accelerates it. "So you're adapting?" "I'm surviving." He pulled out documents, real agreements this time, detailed and fair. Territory recognition, resource sharing, mutual defense pacts, everything you asked for and more. Nira read carefully. It was legitimate, no hidden clauses, no traps, just acknowledgement that the Borderlands existed as an independent entity with equal standing. "Why now?" she asked. "What's the real reason?" Theron was silent for a long moment. "Because you were right," he finally said, the words clearly costing him. "About the old ways being broken. About throwing away wolves who don't fit traditional molds. About power coming from choice instead of bloodlines." He met her eyes. "You've built something better, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." Nira studied her father across the space between them. This man who'd rejected her, exiled her, tried to kill her. This man who'd represented everything wrong with pack society. He looked small now, diminished. "I'll agree to your terms," she said. "On one condition." Name it. You personally apologize to every Omega in Ashclaw who's been mistreated, undervalued, or thrown away. You establish protections for weak wolves. You dismantle the hierarchy that says some lives matter more than others. Theron's jaw tightened. That's asking me to destroy pack structure. That's asking you to fix it, Nira's voice hardened. You don't get peace with the Borderlands while still running the same system that created us. Change, or we're done here. The Council will never, then convince them, or step down and let someone who will. She handed the documents back. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Theron stared at the papers, then at Nira. You've become everything I feared, he said quietly. No. I've become everything you could have helped me be, if you'd chosen differently. Nira turned to leave. You have 1 week to decide. 5 days later, word reached Crestfall that Theron had called an emergency pack meeting. He'd stood before the entire Ashclaw Assembly and announced sweeping reforms, protection for Omegas, dissolution of rigid hierarchies, merit-based advancement instead of bloodline privilege. Half the pack had walked out in protest. The other half had cheered. Elder Morrigan sent a private message. He's trying. It's messy and imperfect, but he's trying. The old wolf is learning new tricks. Nira read the message and felt something release in her chest. Not forgiveness. She wasn't ready for that. Might never be. But acknowledgement that change was possible, even in the most rigid systems, even in people who'd caused the most pain. The final confrontation came 6 months after the Coalition defeat, on the anniversary of Nira's rejection. She hadn't planned to acknowledge the date, but fate had other ideas. Darius appeared at Crestfall's gates, alone, asking to speak with her. Nira almost refused, but curiosity won out. They met in a private room in the main hall, the space thick with history and unsaid words. Darius looked different, thinner, harder, like something fundamental had broken inside him and healed wrong. He couldn't meet her eyes. I came to apologize, he said quietly, for the rejection, for how I handled it, for being a coward when you needed me to be brave. Little late for that. I know. He finally looked up. I felt the bond, Nira. It terrified me. You were supposed to be weak, easy to dismiss, but the bond was strong, stronger than anything I'd felt before. And I panicked. So you destroyed me publicly instead of dealing with your fear privately. Yes. The admission came out broken. I was groomed my whole life to be the perfect alpha heir. Strength, dominance, control. Having an Omega mate, a weak one, didn't fit that image. So I convinced myself you were the problem instead of acknowledging my own weakness. Nira said nothing, just watched him struggle. I've watched what you built, Darius continued. The Borderlands, the Alliance, everything you've accomplished. You've become more powerful than any alpha I know. And I threw you away because I was too blind to see what you could be. You threw me away because you valued appearances more than truth. You're right. He stood, moving toward the door. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that rejecting you was the biggest mistake of my life, and watching you rise without me has been exactly the punishment I earned. He reached for the door handle. Darius. He stopped. The bond is gone, Nira said, severed completely. I feel nothing when I look at you. No anger, no pain, no connection. You're just someone I used to know. I understand. But I hope you learn from this. I hope you become better than you were. Because the world doesn't need more alphas like you used to be. It needs leaders who choose compassion over control. Darius nodded once, then left. Nira sat alone in the room for a long time, thinking about bonds and choices and the strange paths life took. A year ago, his rejection had destroyed her. Now it barely registered. She'd grown beyond him, beyond all of them. The celebration happened on the first day of spring. 12 settlements sent representatives to Crestfall for what they were calling the founding, the official establishment of the Borderland Alliance as a recognized nation. Hundreds of wolves gathered in the valley below the settlement, the largest assembly Nira had ever seen. Former pack wolves and lifelong rogues, strong alphas and weak omegas, young and old, all united by a simple idea, that they mattered. Elder Kessa stood before the crowd, her voice carrying across the valley. 1 year ago, we were scattered, isolated, vulnerable. Today, we stand united. 12 settlements, over 1,000 souls, all protected under the Borderland Alliance. She gestured to Naira, standing beside her. We owe this to one wolf who refused to accept the world as it was, who chose to fight for what it could be. The crowd roared. Kessa raised her hand for silence. The question before us now is, who leads? The Alliance needs a central authority, someone to coordinate defense, settle disputes, represent us to the outside packs. Nira's stomach dropped. She hadn't agreed to this. We propose Naira Vex as first counselor of the Borderland Alliance. All in favor? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of voices shouting agreement, hands raised, howls echoing across the valley. Nira looked at Kessa, who smiled knowingly. You built this, the elder said quietly. You lead it. I'm not qualified. You're the only one qualified. You've proven you'll fight for those who can't fight for themselves. You've shown that power without compassion is worthless. You've created something worth protecting. Kessa's expression softened. Let us protect you for once. Let us stand beside you instead of behind you. Nira looked out at the assembled crowd, at faces she'd healed, trained, fought beside, at wolves who'd found home in her vision of what the world could be, at the family she'd chosen instead of the one she'd been born into. I accept, she said, her voice carrying across the valley. On one condition. This isn't a monarchy, not a pack with a single alpha. We lead together, a council of equals, making decisions that benefit everyone, not just the powerful. The crowd erupted again. Kessa clasped her hand. Then it's official. Welcome home, first counselor. The title felt heavy and right at the same time. That night, after the celebrations died down and most people had returned to their settlements or temporary camps, Naira stood alone on the ridge overlooking the valley. Marcus found her there, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled like terrible wine. Thought you might need this, he said, offering one. Naira took it, sipped, and immediately regretted it. That's awful. Celebration wine is never good. It's traditional. He stood beside her, looking out at the scattered campfires below. Hard to believe a year ago you were dying alone in a cave. Sometimes I still can't process how much has changed. You changed it, every bit of it. No, we changed it, all of us. Naira paused. I was just stupid enough to think it was possible. Stupid or brave, hard to tell the difference sometimes. Marcus raised his cup. To being stupid enough to hope. Nira smiled and clinked her cup against his. To hope. They drank the terrible wine and watched the fires burn against the darkness. Somewhere in the camps below, someone started singing. Others joined in, voices rising in a melody Naira didn't recognize but somehow understood. It was a song about outcasts finding home, about the weak becoming strong, about building something better from the ruins of what came before. It was their song now, the Borderlands song. 3 months later, a letter arrived from Ashclaw. Theron's handwriting, formal and careful. Naira, the reforms are working, slowly, painfully, but working. 3 Omegas have been promoted to senior positions. The hierarchy is loosening. Half the old guard has resigned in protest, but younger wolves are stepping up. Your mother asks about you. She's found her voice, finally. She speaks at council meetings now, advocates for the changes. I think seeing what you built gave her permission to stop being invisible. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that your rejection, my failure, changed more than just you. It changed all of us. The alpha you taught to be better. Theron Naira read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it in a drawer. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement that even monsters could learn. Even broken systems could be fixed. She'd proven that with the Borderlands. Maybe, eventually, the packs could prove it too. 5 years later, the Borderland Alliance had grown to 27 settlements and nearly 3,000 residents. Trade agreements with 6 major packs. Mutual defense packs with 4 more. Recognition from territories across the continent. The Ghost Healer had become First Counselor Naira Vex, leader of a nation built on the radical idea that strength came from community, not dominance. She still healed the wounded personally when she could, still trained fighters, still walked among her people instead of ruling from distance. But she'd also learned to delegate, to trust others with responsibility, to build systems that didn't depend on her alone. The borderlands would survive without her now. That was the greatest victory of all. One evening, standing on the same ridge where she'd stood 5 years before, Nira looked out at the valley transformed. Permanent buildings had replaced most of the tents. Roads connected settlements. Farms produced food. Schools taught children. Life, real life, for wolves who'd been told they didn't deserve it. Marcus's daughter, born 3 years ago, came running up the hill, her small hands glowing faintly with inherited power. "Counselor Naira, Mom says dinner's ready." Nira smiled, scooping up the child. "Tell her I'll be right there." The girl hugged her tight, then ran back down the hill toward the lights and warmth and family waiting below. Naira stood there a moment longer, thinking about the Omega who'd been rejected and thrown away. The girl who'd crawled into a cave expecting to die. She'd survived. More than survived, she'd built something that would outlast her. A legacy not of revenge or bitterness, but of hope and stubborn refusal to accept that the world couldn't change. They'd called her weak. They'd been wrong. Strength wasn't about dominance or bloodlines or pack hierarchies. It was about choosing to keep fighting when everything said to give up. About protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. About building something better from the ashes of what came before. The borderlands were her answer to every wolf who'd said she didn't matter. And that answer was written in every settlement, every life saved, every outcast who'd found home. She mattered. They all mattered. And no one would ever forget it. Naira turned and walked down the hill toward the lights, toward the family she'd chosen, toward the life she'd built from nothing. The ghost healer had finally come home, and the world would never be the same.